If you've watched even a few of my videos, you will know that there are many fairies who delight in seeing us fearful or even to see us suffer. But there are also recorded accounts of fairies clearly grieved to see us in distress and who go out of their way to help us through troubled times. G'day, I'm Kitty. Welcome to Fairy Encounters. Countless are the reports of fairies saving someone from injury and even death. Some are known to literally walk into a person's house and offer a verbal warning or advice to try and save them from harm. But there are quieter, more subtle ways that the fairies help us too. Stealthy acts of kindness that fly under the radar. And sometimes they even share their secrets with us. Have you ever heard of a fairy doctor? Well, here's a twist. They are neither a doctor or a fairy at all. He or she is a kind of agent or emissary for the fairy folk, a human who possesses intricate knowledge of the fairies, their perplexing customs and unlikely cures, a specially chosen person who knows the secrets of the fairies. They are also sometimes known as a fairy prophet. Martin Donlan of Bugorn had a cow that was born in a fairy fort. She never gave satisfaction, and her first 3 calves fell dead when apparently in the best of health. She had her 4th calf on a Sunday morning in May. Martin separated the cow from the calf and secured the door of the calf house. Then Martin started off for Offaly to consult a fairy doctor who lived there. After hearing his story, the fairy doctor told him that the cow belonged to the fairies and advised him to go home quickly and lock the door of the calf house for the next 9 days. If not, he said, the fairies will take the calf out and drown it in the river that runs near your house. Martin started for home quickly, and when he came within earshot of his house, he was greeted by his brother. "You had your journey for nothing, Martin. About an hour after your leaving here, I opened the door of the calf house to feed him, and the calf burst out and ran like mad down the field and jumped into the river. When I went down there, he was stone dead." Well, I didn't say that the fairy doctor was a cure-all. They can offer all sorts of remedies and advice, but not a magical cure for all things. They are, however, considered to possess not only great knowledge of all things, but also great wisdom and an elusive knowing of what fairies are doing. There was a man whose name was Cavini, and he lived on a mountain. He was a mason by trade. Well, one morning, when he was going to his work, his wife asked him to leave off work early in the evening and go into the town to help her carry home some parcels. He said he would do so and went off to his work. When he got to the place where he was working, a little man with a red hat came out from the corner of the house and hit him a slap on the face, then ran away. Startled, Cavini began to work, and he worked on for quite a while, before he began to feel very weak. After some time, he left his work and then went into the town to carry home the parcels as promised. His wife met him and asked him what was the matter with him, that he was not looking well. So he told her about the little man with a red hat who hit him, and that he felt very weak after it. Then they started for home, and the man was hardly able to walk, but he got home anyhow and went to bed. Well, he was in bed a long time and was not improving. A neighbouring man came in to see him one night and told him about a fairy doctor that lived on the mountain. So he sent for him to cure him, and the doctor told his wife to get 3 of the strongest men in the district on a certain night, and to bolt the doors and to shut up the windows, and when a knock would come to the door, not to open it. So the night came when the sick man and his wife and the 3 strong men were in the house. A loud knock came to the door, but they would not open it. There was then a big clamour of people and horses outside the door, and they knocked hard several times at the door, and the 3 strong men in the house fainted. The sick man turned in his bed and recovered. It seems that fairy doctors not only know and understand the ways of the fairies, their habits, rituals, and their dwelling places, but are also able to see them. One theory is that these special people have spent long periods of time in the company of fairies, and on return to the mortal world, they can see the unseen and know where and when the fairies will be at certain times. A young lady went out walking one day and disappeared. She was engaged to a young man who searched the countryside and found not a sign of her. By and by, he went to the fairy doctor. The fairy doctor listened and told him to go to a certain gap at midnight that night and watch. He told him he would see her pass, and he must catch her as she passed through the gap, for if he tried and let her go, it would be worse for the both of them. So it was, the man went to the gap. After a time in waiting, at last his beloved came riding on a white horse, and as she passed, he grabbed her, took her home, and married her the very same night. This is really interesting because we see the fairy doctor frees the woman from the fairies. Is this an abuse of the gift that the fairies have given him? Do the fairy resent these special people giving advice to save or help humans? I have read of fairy beating fairy doctors, which suggests that sometimes they're not happy about it, but for the most part, they allow fairy doctors to assist people without interfering in it at all. Why? Is this all a game to the fairies? Let's find out. I have 5 more wild and true stories of fairy doctors, or fairy prophets if you prefer, to satisfy your curious mind. But first, if you enjoy my videos, please consider joining me as a member of the channel. Your support helps me enormously to build the channel and to reach a wider audience. And this is important because I truly believe that there are a lot of people who want to know about real fairies. They just don't know that the channel is here. If you'd like to become a member, please click the join button below to find out more. Now, back to the stories. A young girl and her mother once went on a visit to a friend who was sick in Golden. When it was time to go home, the mother stayed behind as her friend was very bad. She said, though, that she would go part of the way with her daughter and then return to the sick house. The daughter said no, that the night was bright and the journey short. She started for home and took a shortcut through the fields. As she was coming near a paddock at the back of her own house, she thought she heard a noise like men hurling. She got up on a stile and saw in the paddock 24 little men hurling on their best. She stayed watching them for some time, but they took no notice of her. When she went home, she asked her father to come out and see the little men hurling. He told her not to go near them anymore and to say nothing about them. So the girl went to bed soon after, but in the morning she couldn't get up. They brought the doctor to her, but he couldn't make out what was wrong. Eventually, as she was getting no better, they decided to bring her to the fairy doctor named Shanahan, who was living 4 or 5 miles from Golden. When he saw her, he told the father to drive home with her, but on no account to talk to anyone they met. On their way home, so that they wouldn't have to go through the village of Golden, they came around by Templenoe. They met several people who asked how the little girl was, but each time the father only hit the horse and went faster. He got home without speaking to anyone, and the child was put to bed. In the morning, she was as well again as ever. She afterwards went on to America and got married there. They say there was a charm on Shanahan, as he had cured many people. It was Mr. Middleton who owned the horse that was cured, and that doctor never went by any other name than the Fairy Man. It was said that he could cure horses and other animals from any distance without actually seeing or treating them. The example is from John Middleton, who had a horse that had many lumps on it. He was advised to go to this fairy man and tell him of his troubles. He did this, and when he met this fairy man, he was asked by him how many lumps the horse had and what part of the animal were they. Middleton told the fairy man that there were 7. "Well," said the fairy man, "go home and you will find his 7 lumps are gone." There were really 8 lumps on the animal, so when Middleton did go home, he found 7 lumps gone, but the one still remained that he hadn't told of. The 4th stands on rising ground beside the little village of Upper Cartronhue. It is a good number of whitethorn and blackthorn bushes growing around it. There is also studded around it a large amount of stones and some rare kind of flags. In those early days, it was a custom for the women to bring their linens to a well which was used for the purpose of washing. At these particular wells, there was a large stone on which the women used to bat the clothes with a beetle. This stone was usually called the batting stone. Well, there was one of those wells in this village, but the batting stone was very rough and did not suit its purpose at all. At this Forth there was a large flag which had a very smooth surface, and a local man, in order to accommodate the women, removed it from the Forth and placed it at the well for a batting stone. Some time after this, the man began to lose his cattle and other stock too. He was puzzled at this, as he was giving his stock the best of care, and still they were going, and he felt very sad to be losing his chief means of support. Now, in those far-off days, there lived in some districts a fairy doctor. This class of man was called a fairy prophet, and whenever people met with losses in cattle or other trouble, they usually went to this fairy prophet man, and he was supposed to know what was wrong, or if they had offended the good people. This man who was losing his cattle went to the fairy prophet, and he told him to go back and go to the well and leave back that stone he took from the Forth for a batting stone, and leave it in the secret place he had taken it from, as it was of the Forth, and it should not have been removed, and that then he would lose no more cattle. The man did as he was ordered by the fairy prophet, and it was said that he lost no more cattle after this. The following story has been told by Stephen Cagney of Killistina, who died recently at the age of 96 years. He worked as a young man with a farmer named Doohy, who lived near Rockwell. This farmer had a very handsome daughter aged 19 years, who fell sick of a decline, as Stephen explained it. The neighbours said the good people had her taken away, but her parents refused to believe it. One day, an old woman called to the house, and on seeing the girl seated at a blazing turf fire on a warm May day, asked what ailed her. On being told by the mother, she called the farmer outside and advised him to send a messenger at once to the fairy doctor who dwelled at the foot of the mountain, and that he would surely cure her. She went on to say that this messenger should not travel until dark on any account. Stephen was asked to go on this errand, and though only 20 years of age, he readily consented. In those days, carts were the only mode of travelling, and Stephen set out in his master's cart, drawn by a powerful bay mare. About 11:30 he reached his destination and told the fairy doctor his business. The latter was a little, wizened old man of great age, with small, bright eyes like a bird, and a very upright, active figure. He bade Stephen enter and asked several questions about the girl. Then he gave oaten cake and goat's milk to Stephen to refresh himself, while he would be making up some medicine for the girl. After mixing several ingredients together, he poured water straight from a spring well outside the door onto them, and put all into a dark red flat bottle about the size of a half pint, corked it tightly, and handed it to Stephen. Be sure to guard the bottle carefully, and on no account speak to a soul until you reach your master's farmyard and deliver up the bottle. If taken according to direction, the girl should be well in a week. After going about 3 miles, Stephen came to the stream, and the horse shivered and sweated with fright and refused to go any further. A woman, shrouded in a black coat and hood, stepped out and asked Stephen for a lift. He made no answer, but jumped down, caught the horse by the head, and by the fair dint of coaxing got the horse safely across the stream. On sitting up again, Stephen found, to his horror, that the woman was seated in the cart. He struck the horse violently and put him to a gallop, but after 6 miles, the woman was still there. Several times Stephen had to strike the claw-like hand of the woman to keep her from getting the precious bottle in his inside pocket. The horse kept on galloping madly, and at last Stephen was thankful to see New Inn Church in the dim light. At once the horse stood still, and Stephen was relieved to find that the woman was gone. He kept the horse to a walk for the remainder of the journey, which was about 2 miles. It was 4 in the morning when he reached Dewey's farm, and when the farmer asked Stephen how he had fared, Stephen handed him the bottle explaining about the directions, then fell in the yard in a dead faint. On recovering, he told the whole story about the woman to his master, and the girl, Nellie Dewey, was fully recovered in a week and was a strong, healthy girl ever after. Until not many years ago, it was the custom of all the young and aged people to assemble in the houses of the very old people and listen to their stories. Some of these old people were noted storytellers, and it was most interesting to listen to them. There were many tales told of this one man who used to visit this parish. If one was able to remember all that was told about him, a nice book could be written. His name was Con Sheridan, and he went by the name of the Fairy Doctor. When anything happened to anybody's property or themselves, the first one they went to see was Con Sheridan. Now, there was a poor old man that fell into a bit of money. Well, the first thing he bought was a cow, but to his surprise, the 3rd day after he brought home the cow, she lay down, and all the efforts of himself and his neighbours could not get her to stand on her feet again. So, on the 4th day, a council was held between the man and his neighbours, and they decided that the man should go for Sheridan. He had a donkey and a cart, but said he would walk and not bring the donkey. When he arrived at the house of Con Sheridan, he approached the door and knocked. To his surprise, he was called by his name to come in at once. He went in, and there he was, face to face with Con Sheridan, who spoke to him just as if he knew him all his life. He did not see this man ever in his life before. He first bade him sit down and called him by name and said, "Why did you walk?" The old man said he had no other way, and Con said, "You have a donkey and a cart." But the old man didn't answer. Then Con said, "You did your best with the cow before you came to me, but I can do nothing for her unless I see her, and I have no way of travelling unless you hire a car." "But," said the old man, "I have no money to pay for the car." "You have," said Con. "In the inner pocket of your vest, you have 10 pounds. The old man agreed, and the car was soon got, and off they started, Con telling the man many things about the parish on their way. When Con saw the cow, he told the man to get a can and to go to Vinegar Hill, about a mile distant. There he was to remove a flat stone, and under it there were heaps of ants. He was to put them in the can, then bring them home and boil them for 10 minutes. Then he was to give the cow the water to drink. Then she would be right. The old man did as he was told, and an hour later the cow jumped up and started to walk about. One thing that really interests me is the qualities that the fairies must look for in a human to undertake such a role as fairy doctor or fairy prophet. I can't imagine that they would just grab a random human, allow them to live with them and share some of their fascinating, insightful knowledge. What qualities do you think the fairies favour in a human? I'm sure there are many characteristics of humans which fairies like to see, like compassion and intelligence, perhaps intuition and humour, of course, but maybe humility and discretion too. I tend to think they have a soft spot for musicians and storytellers, poets and painters, those who try to understand the mysteries, who try to express their understanding of the world around them. But there could be more to it than that. Perhaps when choosing a fairy doctor or prophet, the fairies are attracted to humans who are quiet, those who live something of a solitary life, or at least have quiet around them, space around them, space for thought, for contemplation, for calm, maybe space for wisdom to flourish. These fairy doctors or prophets, they're not wild and crazy people. They are mindful of their words and their actions, and they don't react to situations. They tend to be older, with a little of life's experiences tucked under their belt already. I wonder how you would feel if you were chosen by the fairy for this role. It would be flattering, I think, but also terrifying. Any connection or interaction with fairies is fraught with danger, but to do so regularly would be nerve-wracking, I think. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. I hope I've given you something interesting to ponder in the coming week, and I will see you next Friday. Until then, stay curious. Cheerio.